So let's talk about Veep a little bit. I think it felt like for viewers of Veep that you came out of nowhere as Jonah Ryan and were, a big part of the show. I don't know if it felt like that for you. I believe you did book the role pretty quickly after arriving in LA, but where were you in your career when that happened? Sort of, can you take us back to that moment where you were cast in Veep?
Yeah, so I had been like, it's like that thing where they say like, it was like a 12-year overnight success, like that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
exactly.
Like it was I had moved out to LA from Chicago 2.5 years before before getting cast on Veep. So I hadn't been in town that long. I had been in Chicago like
Hmm.
doing indie theater stuff, like trying to do commercials and trying to get cast on movies that came through Chicago. Um, and with some success. And I think I always kind of knew going to Chicago that, pardon me, I always knew going to Chicago that eventually I would end up going to either coast. Like my interest in theater led me to think that New York might be an option, and my love of movies and TV made me think that LA would also be an option. But I wasn't sure exactly where it was going to go. But had a little bit of luck, like and when I say a little bit, I really do mean like a very small amount of luck in Chicago and like on camera stuff. And so um, I also liked the idea of not really dealing with, brutal winters anymore. So that sounded nice. Um, so my wife and I moved out to LA, and I started taking classes at UCB, which I really enjoyed and met a lot of good friends. And then I worked at commercial casting companies. I was like running sessions for commercial casting companies, and then ended up having some luck in that world. Had like a busy year, was sort of making a living as like a guy in commercials, and then ultimately got introduced to Allison Jones by my friend Peter Kuzakis, who was working at her office, and then like went in like 5 or 6 times, and like the sixth time that I went in was for Veep, and it just kind of kept working out. So it was very much like Veep was the first television show that I ever appeared on. I had never been on a television show before, and that was the first one. But
Yeah,
I
I
had
mean
been
that's pretty wild.
it is no, it's absolutely fucking wild, and it usually doesn't work like that. But I had also like just in that way of like of just saying that like I had started doing this when I was in college, and I had spent 12 years trying to get to that point where I could come out of nowhere.
And then you're coming in to the show where you're right there as a regular character on the show with everybody, including Julia Louis-Dreyfus at the top.
Mhm.
What do you remember about sort of that very first scene that you shot, with her or with the rest of the cast? Was it intimidating? Was it, how did you? Because it's also there's an improv element and kind of an unpredictability to it. What was, what do you remember about that very first scene?
I mean, I remember being incredibly nervous, and I've kind of told the story before. Like as we did the first take, and Tony always jokes around about. Well, Tony and I will joke around about this, that like American directors in between each take, they know American actors like need you to come in and be like, "Oh my God, that was so brilliant. That was perfect. All right, we're going to do it again. Let's change this one thing." And British directors, to their credit, don't do that because it is like sort of unhealthy. And so after the first take, I was just like, I'm getting fucking fired. Like that was awful. And then like I made it through lunch. I didn't get fired at lunch. So I was like, all right, this is going okay. But like the thing was that like we had this rehearsal process that was like went for about, a week or 9 days before we started filming. So
Mm.
every scene that we were going to be doing, we had improvised around. We had found new things. We'd spent time in the room together without cameras. The cast had gotten very close very quickly because we were all out in Baltimore together. I think we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed the process of it. So it felt very supportive and collaborative, and it felt very ensemble very quickly. So by the time I was on set, I felt like I had rehearsed and performed these scenes enough to have a footing to feel somewhat confident that it was going to go okay, even though I was incredibly nervous. Um, but yeah, when it came to the improv element, like I can't tell you that I'm an incredible improviser. I think I'm fair. I think I'm fine at it. especially when you put it up next to people like Matt Walsh, who are unbelievable at it. Um, but it wasn't, I think one thing that was nice is that I felt like the stuff that Armando did after I got cast and when I went back and watched uh In the Loop and The Thick of It and The Day Today and all the stuff that Armando had done in the past, even like the Armando Iannucci show, especially The Thick of It and In the Loop, that was a style of comedy and a type of project that I felt like I understood because I just felt like, oh, this is my taste. I know what this is, and I feel like I fit in this world. So I think having like confidence in that way of like, and then also the improvisation was less about finding the funniest joke and more about finding some bit of human behavior or some reaction that we hadn't been thinking of. Like when he said, do the whole scene, but change the words, just hit the major beats. You're not trying to find a better joke. You're trying just to find something different or something unexpected that makes it feel more natural, that makes it feel more lived in. And then you'll find something funny in that. And I did feel really comfortable doing that. And the fact that we had the leeway to do that was made me feel a lot more grounded in it. But no, of course, it's incredibly intimidating when you are opposite Julia, who's incredible, and Tony, who I knew from Arrested Development, and Walsh because I had done stuff at UCB. Like these are all incredibly talented people, and it's incredibly intimidating. But everybody very early on was welcoming and didn't make me feel like I was a rookie who had no idea what they were talking about. And they also like gave me a lot of grace to make like rookie mistakes too. So credit to
Yeah,
them.
well, you are playing a sort of younger rookie character in their world, so that probably helps too. Your status is below, at least at the beginning, almost everybody else on the show, so you could kind of play into that.
Yeah, definitely. There's like a overconfidence overconfidence despite their lack of experience could probably apply both to the character and to me on that first day.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Um, Jonah, much has been made of all the insults to Jonah and how, you were kind of subjected to that over the years. Um, did you ever sort of feel defensive on his behalf? Because he is such an odious character, but you kind of have to be on the side of your character to some degree. So did you ever sort of get defensive for Jonah?
You know, not really, like not in the way of like specifically to insults. One of the things about the show was that when the insults happened, it was the language of the show that they just happened. You don't really react to them.
Yeah, it's
They
just the way
happen.
they talk to each other, these characters.
Yeah. So there was never really a, a defense of Jonah when it came to the insults because you essentially didn't hear them. You had to just move past them and go right to the next thing. Um, we always would joke around about the fact that sometimes you would see writers come in, look you up and down, go back to Village, and then come back with an insult that they came up with by looking at your body in that moment.
Yeah, yikes.
Yeah, like when that one of like the ones that I remember very clearly, that being like that Mandel came in and said, Reed, tell Tim that he looks like a bunch of melted Play-Doh stuck to a flagpole. And it's like that just like that's just my body, guys. Like that's just that so anyway. But I
Yeah.
think like the sort of like character defense was like very specifically I remember I was telling the story to my on the I was on a friend's podcast a couple weeks ago, and like one time Jonah had been, getting molested at work by Teddy, and there was a scene where he was supposed to reveal this information on the phone on somebody's porch, and in the rehearsal process was like I was trying to make that whole storyline I was trying to make it so that it really weighed on him, that you might actually have some empathy for what Jonah was going for if you saw or going through if you saw that it was affecting him. And And so I just remember that like the scene just required that everybody on the porch overheard him on the phone. And I just kept saying, like, guys, like, I understand what we need production wise, but I'm telling you, he would not reveal this information to anyone if they were able to overhear it. Like he would just keep walking away from them. He would walk further and further away to say it. So ultimately, that scene ends up taking place, like after a lot of conversation, that scene ends up taking place in a car where he can't escape other people overhearing it. He like tries to like, bring the phone down and away so that people don't hear, but they all do. And it just
Yeah.
like, so there were moments of like character defense like that,
Hmm.
where
Yeah, where you're feeling a little
yeah,
protective.
a little protective, but it's not like, oh, I don't want him to be so odious. It was just like, no, make him more odious.
Yeah.
I just want him to still behave in like sort of real ways.
Yeah. You were mentioning before the resurgence of the show, I think especially after Kamala Harris took over
Hmm.
as the candidate, and that you would kind of, trade the resurgence for not having to deal with all of the echoes of the show. Um, I assume it also helped your rewatch podcast with Matt Walsh, the renewed interest. What did that feel like in the moment, sort of when everyone was talking about the show again, and you guys are doing this, had been doing this podcast for a while, I think, at that point.
Well, it was weird. That actually all kind of happened right before we finished the rewatch. Like, we always wanted to
Yeah,
make
you're
our way
like, oh,
through it.
we timed this a little wrong.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
timed it a little wrong. But the one funny thing is that like uh and just the way that television is consumed now, it's been an odd thing because like for a lot of people, this is not a show that was on the air and now is not on the air and they're catching up with it. It really is more like the television show Veep premiered this summer. It came
Yeah.
out 6 months ago. And for some people, it came out a year ago. It's not they're watching an older show. I don't know. It's just the way that things are consumed now. So, like,
Hmm.
weirdly, and it has been like this before, that was like the biggest, like the biggest surge of people, I think, since we went off the air that has found it. But I've met a lot of people like over the last 4 or 5 years since we went off the air that are like, I'm just starting it. I just caught up with them. And to them, it doesn't feel like it came out in 2012. To them, it feels like it came out in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, Julia Louis-Dreyfus has been very clear that she does not think Selena Meyer and Kamala Harris have anything in common. But I did hear that she made some comparisons between Jonah and JD Vance. Did that
Yeah,
ring true for you?
it did only in that like it's, a human like I mean Jonah, his whole thing was he doesn't care, it's not like he doesn't have a morality that he stands on. He just wants to be either in power or standing next to power. And forward motion in his career is the only thing that matters. And that clearly seems true with JD Vance, who seems to have abandoned a lot of principles he had in order to be on the ticket. Um, but then also beyond that, like Jonah just has no idea how to act as a normal human being. So when you see like, like JD Vance at the donut shop,
Yeah, I was going
not
to bring that
having
up.
really, yeah, like having people be like, I don't want to be videotaped with you. I don't want to be seen with you. And
That
also
felt very Veep.
he has no idea how to order donuts. Like those are two things that you could say are very Jonah-like.
Yeah, I think I remember the donut shop getting the Veep closing credits treatment with the
Yep.
music, which has become a consistent meme over the years since the show was on.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say is that Jonah Ryan at least had one thing that I think he was actually good at was ordering, picking the right thing for a menu from a menu when he was with a candidate on the campaign trail. I feel like he always knew what to order, and like begrudgingly, people would be like, "All right, yeah, like let Jonah handle that," because he always picks the right thing. So I do think in ways Jonah Ryan is actually a more successful candidate and a more successful person than JD Vance.
So I think it's now been 5 years since Veep ended, and you've gotten to do so many different types of characters since then. I mean, I think there's always that fear, right? When this is your first TV job, and or am I only ever going to be known as Jonah, which certainly happens to people and could have happened. But I think you've gotten opportunities, including with Nobody Wants This, and now Handmaid's Tale. Is there something that you really want to do that you haven't been able to do yet that you sort of think about as, oh, I wish I really would like to do something like this?
The short answer is yes, but the long answer is I feel like I've been very lucky in that, like, I mean, like, I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess there are like two short answers and a long answer. Like the short answer is yes. The other short answer is what I really want is to keep doing it. I like this
Yeah,
job and I want to keep doing it. So however it manifests, I'm cool with. But then and then the other sort of longer answer is like, knock on wood, I do feel pretty lucky that we had long off seasons and I've been able to work on a bunch of different stuff and I can kind of like I remember one time a friend of mine who I know from back in Chicago who's in the art world kind of always talked about like he was like the choices you make are a part of the art that you do. And I've always tried to like I feel like I've been very lucky in that I can like look back at all the things I can do and I've done and be like, oh, this is great. Like these are all a part of the world that I wanted to be in. Like sort of across the board, I feel like I've generally been pretty good at like jumping into things because there was some underlying interest in that type of project, even if it's like a tiny indie movie or just like jumping on to another television show for a few episodes, or if it was like some sort of larger commercial studio thing, like there's always some inherent interest in what's happening. So I feel like I've been pretty lucky to do a bunch of varied things, but then, you want it to continue. So yeah, short answer, yes. Long answer, feels good to be able to do that sort of thing already.